Well, good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. We're so excited to have you here for the webinar on hidden hazards and really looking at how we protect the consumer experience given the challenge we're facing today with foreign objects. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. As participants, all your lines will be muted, but we really do encourage you to use that Q&A box and type in those questions or thoughts you want to get to the panelists. We'll have some great time to engage with them at the end and really get those questions answered for you. We know some of you may be joining and can't see the slides that we're sharing tonight. The good news is here within a few days, those will be posted on ncba.org, and we encourage you to click that producer tab and find all of the information you need there to watch the recording. We have a great lineup of speakers tonight, so don't want to take too much time, but we'll go down the list and introduce them. Dr. Trey Patterson is the president and CEO at Padlock Ranch Company, and they operate commercial cow-calf, feedlot, and farming enterprises. Patrick Linnell is the director of cattle market research and analysis at CattleFax. Dr. Trent Schwartz is the assistant professor of animal science at West Texas A&M University. And Dr. Pat Mies is Vice President of Food Safety and Quality Assurance for Tyson Fresh Meats. We really couldn't have 3 or 4 more leading experts with us tonight. So with that, Trey, I'll hand it over to you to share some insights.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica, and welcome everybody. I'm excited about this webinar today and what we're going to be able to share with you. I just want you to stop and think for a minute just how amazing it is, the resilience that our industry possesses. Think back to this time in 2020 when we were in the midst of this pandemic, and it looked like the industry was going to have some major challenges ahead. And of course, we were worried about a lot of things then, but look how we got through that situation. Today, our beef demand is as strong as it's been. We've improved beef quality markedly. And you know what? Consumers, they want beef on the center of their plate. I just think we have so much to be happy about, so much to congratulate ourselves for the things that we've been able to accomplish in our industry. But there will be headwinds in the future. We know that. And I just don't think we can rest on our past successes. I think it's absolutely critical that we strive for continual improvement. You know, we can contribute a great deal of our success in the industry to our approach to measure and to report and then provide education on how to fix the challenges and problems that we're facing. The National Beef Quality Audit, which started in the early 90s, has provided us with that measure of industry performance. The Beef Quality Assurance Program is a grassroots, industry-driven educational program, voluntary by the way, it teaches common sense practices on animal management and care, efficiency, profitability, and ultimately, the goal is to improve consumer confidence in our beef product. Can you guys remember back in the 90s, in the early 90s, after that first beef quality audit came out, it was determined that injection site lesions were causing significant losses in our industry. And we were concerned it was going to begin, if it wasn't already, hurting the perception of beef. And the industry made this concerted effort, just a real intentional effort through the Beef Quality Assurance or BQA program to start educating people on this issue, just making them aware of it, and then also taking it a step further on providing education on how we fix it. So many other, and to me, I look at that, I look back to the beef quality audit, that early audit in the 90s, and the challenges that were faced then, and the things that have been brought up in the last 30 plus years. Our industry's done a great job of addressing those. And we do that voluntarily because we care about the industry. And I look at this last beef quality audit in 2022, and it did reveal that there is one issue that we haven't fixed yet, and that's the issue of foreign objects in beef. On the non-fed side, the plants that were audited, 100% of those plants reported that they found foreign objects in beef, and half of them, And to me, this is pretty profound. Half of them reported that they had customer complaints, meaning that some of these foreign products made it to further processing, such as the beef grind or others further down the supply chain that complained about bird shot leaving the plant. Yeah, that's bird shot. And to me, that's amazing. We're talking about shotgun pellets, folks. And interestingly, the foreign material in beef was not unique to the non-fed sector. They found it was in fed cattle plants as well. So that, as we set up today's seminar and this excellent lineup of speakers, I think you'll see that we're going to provide some insights on this very issue. You're going to be provided with information on the importance of coal cow and bull management to the economic efficiency of our industry, data on what foreign objects are being found in beef and the magnitude of that problem, and also what work is being done to identify and alleviate the negative effects of foreign objects in beef. Really look forward to the speakers, and I'll be tying back in with you towards the end. Enjoy.
Thanks, Trey. And I think Trey lays a great foundation for the discussion, especially from an economic side. As we start talking about the economics of the coal cow industry and the non-fed beef supply in general. So as we go through the next few slides, a few things that I'll want to discuss with you here today. First, as we look at the economics of the coal cow market, what will become very clear is that coal cows is one area in particular where there's an especially strong connection between animal welfare and husbandry and value to the producer. And I'll make some of those connections here as we work through the discussion. I'll start off with just laying that 30,000 foot view perspective relative to the market foundation, the market landscape that we're in here today, and a bit of the outlook going forward. A lot of these principles in the coal cow market remain true, whether we're in a bull market or a bear market. But I think that's especially important from a valuation standpoint when you think about how tight these cattle numbers are today. In a cow inventory at some of the lowest levels since the 1950s. And if you look at just the decline that we've seen in total cow numbers, and this rolls together both beef cows and dairy cows, down nearly 3 million head from the cycle highs in 2019. Again, a pretty dramatic and prolonged contraction. Now, if you look at our forecast here going forward, as we think about culling rates for these cows, it's already dropped down low enough to indicate a slow rebuilding process, but still just not very many replacement heifers in the pipeline. So as you think about what that means from a balance sheet standpoint in terms of cow numbers, we could see a slight increase as we head in towards 2026, but for all intents and purposes, we're remaining here at or near cyclical lows as we look towards 2025 and likely on in towards 2026. And frankly, with that tight supply of replacement heifers in the pipeline at this point, it does still set the stage for a slow rebuild when it does take place. And certainly drought will be a big factor that we're going to continue to need to monitor as an industry as we work through the spring, summer, and fall of 2025. As you flip to the next slide, as we think about the coal cow market, again, and these tightening cow numbers, to no surprise, we're seeing a dramatic tightening in cow slaughter numbers as well, down and approaching 2 million head from that high in 2022. And not only do we just have fewer cows around, again, both the beef cow producer and the dairy cow producer have tightened culling rates. So again, really resulting in a double whammy in terms of tightening those cow slaughter numbers. And certainly, again, as both industries try to stabilize and rebuild here in the years ahead, it does suggest that the coal cow market, in terms of supplies, will remain tight here for the foreseeable future. And this just emphasizes the importance then of every single animal through the supply chain. again, because to Trey's comment, the beef, our beef consumer, they love beef. They want beef. We wouldn't be achieving these high prices today without consumer demand. And so, frankly, the consumer wants all the beef through the system that we can provide them. And so that's why, again, maximizing and making sure that, again, we don't have to dispose of this high value product because of foreign material contamination, it just becomes that much more important. As you jump to the next slide, a few key principles as we do think about just navigating the cull cow market here today. As you think about cull cows, historically, they represent around 20% of revenue to an individual cow-calf operation. And at the same time, on a 10 or 20-year average basis, cull cows represent around 20% of US beef production. So if you just want to think of that 20%, that also says that as an individual operation or as an industry, cull cows deserve their full 20% of the attention when it comes to marketing and management as well. In the calf crop and fed cattle supply, yes, more significant, but 20% is a substantial portion of that beef supply and also a substantial ticket to the individual producer. Now, as we do think about this hive market, again, certainly just suggests that there is a high value for animal welfare. Think about that $1,800 cull cow, and she represents a significant ticket. And if some of that, if she's worth around $1.35, $1.40 per pound, for every pound that has to be disposed of later or becomes a risk because of a mobility issue of that cow, and that's a significant value loss for someone along the supply chain. And again, just thinking about that value of that 1 pound, it's significant in terms of dollars per head. And then also thinking about the value of condition for a reasonably conditioned cow versus a thin cow in pretty slim condition. Also keeping in mind the seasonality. As you look across markets, the cull cow market, as we'll look at in a minute, has one of the most distinct and consistent seasonal patterns of any market out there, and especially in the cattle markets. And so have that seasonality in mind as you think about ways to just make the most of this strong cull cow market that we have today. And also thinking about the value of gain versus cost of gain. And if every pound of weight on that cow is worth $1.40, what's the cost to add an additional pound? And in a lot of cases, adding that additional pound, while it's not only doing that cow some favors in terms of if she's thin, giving her some more energy to make it through the system, obviously that transportation and running through an auction barn is a significant energy draw. Adding that weight, that flesh, gives her more energy to work through there. And at the same time, in many cases, there's positive value to be gained for the operation. And also thinking about how much it varies operation to operation. Our industry is obviously about as diverse as it comes. And so there's obviously no one size fits all prescription relative to cull cow marketing and management. But again, continuing to think about ways that we can fit these principles into our operation. And then also thinking about drought considerations. In recognizing that continues to be a challenge for a lot of folks and may be here as we look down the road as well. In that oftentimes culling old and open cows early as drought becomes a problem, both does the operation and those cows some good. As you jump to the next slide, as you look at cull cow prices here today, this is just looking at average, US average annual cull cow prices. You can see the substantial run up that we've seen with utility cows likely to average somewhere around $1.35 per pound here this year, which again, that's translating to over $1,800 per head on a 13 and a half weight cow. Now, what's just as significant as these high prices, though, is also the value differences. And you can see that widening spread between a more adequately fleshed utility cow and a thinner canner cutter cow. And also keeping in mind, this isn't just the long lines of quality grade. Again, cows that have questionable mobility. Again, if the buyer is concerned about whether this cow may actually be able to make it through the system or not, even at the auction barn, that risk will be priced into her price in terms of the value that the producer receives. And certainly you could also extend that idea to repeat offenders in terms of foreign material and this buckshot issue. And so again, just thinking about these value differences, while a rising tide lifts all boats, and you can see even the lower performers receiving higher prices today, it certainly also widens out the spread and just means more value for doing things the right way. As we jump to the next slide, so I want to flip to the demand side. As you look at our market and compare where we are today as a beef industry compared to back in the 80s and 90s, again, before the industry's focus on BQA and fixing some of the challenges that were identified at the time. We've made a dramatic shift in our industry, changing from a supply-driven market where we produce beef and this is what the consumer's going to get. We hope you like it, but if not, then that's not our problem, to really a demand-driven market, but where the industry has made that concerted effort to understand what the consumer wants and needs and fulfilling that. So we transitioned from a time frame where, again, with the war on fat and limited focus on quality, beef demand, as you see, was literally cut in half. But we've been on a solid uptrend for coming on 3 decades at this point, since the late 90s, of improved consumer demand. And in fact, last year it was the second strongest calculated demand in 37 years. And 2025 is on pace to best it yet. And certainly, as you think about the drivers of demand, in quality is certainly a huge portion of the story. As we've continued to increase the quality grade of the cattle in the fed cattle supply chain, in well over 80% of cattle grading prime and choice. Again, an increasing percentage of prime where it used to be a rarity, and now it's a meaningful percentage of the fed slaughter mix, and also an increase in upper 2/3 certified Angus beef type product as well. And so certainly there's a component where we've just made a concerted effort to produce a better product. At the same time, the U.S. again also has the safest beef supply chain in the world. And so as you think about those two components, those have certainly been what's worked in our favor and gotten us to where we are today, and certainly not something that we do want to sacrifice as an industry. As you think about also demand headed forward, but we've also been in a fairly solid economic environment. Despite all these inflationary challenges, the consumer, the job market remains strong, unemployment remains historically very low, and consumer incomes continue to move higher. The one thing we can't control is, again, unfortunately, we don't have control over that, but what we can control is what we do as an industry with that continued focus on quality and safety of the product. As we go to the next slide, the same pertains specific to ground beef. Well, again, so much of our focus is often on the fed cattle supply and thinking about high quality middle meats, ribeyes, strip loins, things of that nature. We also can't forget that it's over 50% of US beef consumption that's in the form of ground beef. And certainly ground beef has also benefited from this environment today where protein and specifically animal protein is just popular across the United States. Certainly, despite these despite the challenges that we've seen over time with negative press surrounding red meat, certainly protein today is receiving a pretty positive light in a lot of ways, and ground beef fits right into that story. If you look at ground beef expenditures, that total market was over $58 billion last year, and this chart adjusts for inflation. And so as you compare back to around 2000, ground beef spending, even accounting for inflation, has literally doubled since that time frame. And so again, as we take this back to the conversation on foreign material, this isn't something that we want to take lightly either. The consumer loves our product, and so we need to continue to produce that product that's not only high quality, but also safe and again, free of contaminants. And as we go to the next slide, a few other considerations, not necessarily specific to foreign material, but some other marketing strategies for producers to have in mind. Again, we talked through how some of these value differences, animal welfare and marketing and management, all go hand in hand. Would invite you and encourage you to go on to ncba.org/producers to look at this full study and guide to cold cow management. Some useful considerations there, building on some of the things I've talked about tonight, including some of these specific strategies that producers can look at to really maximize their value in terms of cold cows. And the biggest point I would emphasize there is that the cold cow marketing doesn't have to be an all or nothing ordeal, and especially compared to the calf crop, where often there can be challenges on hitting a full load lot. Cold cows, that often is a less important factor, and so there's often little ways that we can make adjustments here and there to not only benefit the cows, but capture some additional value. As we go to the next slide, one final thing that I would show is just that seasonality component relative to cold cow prices. You can see that very consistent, strong market during the summer. As you think about the thrill of the grill, Americans across the country firing up the grills, and lean beef demand tends to be the strongest. And then breaking into the fall, again, as 70% of the nation's cow herd is a spring calving operation. Cows are cold and make their way to market. At the same time, the demand is seasonally slowing into the winter months. So just something to keep in mind. But obviously, as you look at prices here so far this year, on pace for record levels, and currently sitting just near record levels here today. And with that, I think I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
All right, so I want to dive into what we are doing on the research side of things, particularly here at West Texas A&M and in joint with the beef checkoff. And so I want to preface, when I was getting my graduate degree at Texas A&M, one of the things I worked on and was the lead graduate student on was the National Beef Quality Audit. And so Trey mentioned some of the output that we got from that and the large number of plants that were having serious issues with foreign material coming in and out of their facility. And I knew once I started working somewhere at a university level and had the ability to perform research, this is something that I wanted to take on immediately. And so I want to give kind of a research update on the current checkoff funded study in partnership with NCBA, where we're looking at some foreign material detection techniques in the live animal potentially. And so looking at how can we detect this material as it's coming or before it's coming into the facility to try to help reduce the numbers that we're getting. So to look into it just a little bit further, what are we finding? And you're going to see some pretty crazy things on this slide, but we're finding everything. I mean, a little bit of everything. Now, obviously, when you think of foreign material, the big thing that gets brought up is metal shot, and that's obviously the biggest problem causer. It's the #1 found foreign metal material item. I want to preface that most of the items that we're talking about specifically for foreign material were relating back to metal objects that are coming from the live side, not something that's added to the product post harvest. This is the animal is coming in live containing these metal objects. And so you can look on here, there is a very, very wide array of items that we're finding. We have a Rolodex of pictures that plants and individuals have shared with us, and we have a lot of that individual material that we're cataloging for future use and educational purposes. But metal shot being the biggest, and then you're going to see, again, there's a difference between buckshot and birdshot. So for the hunters in the room, buckshot obviously being much larger diameter, birdshot being that very, very fine diameter. And then the one that we think is on the rise the most are darts. And I'll show you a cool picture here in a minute with those. Next slide, please. So one thing, you know, we always get asked this question, and again, we've done several of these talks with producers, and everybody wants to know, where is it coming from? Who is the culprit in this endeavor? And where in the supply chain is this foreign material coming in? And so again, as I've talked with different groups and various people, we've come up kind of with a list of where some of this is coming from. But I want to preface and make it known that most of what we're seeing is coming from production ag. On the production side of things, specifically cattle gathering techniques. Cattle get in rough country, cattle won't come out. The first instinct is use a shotgun or rat shot and let's move those cattle with some metal shot. We've been asked multiple times, how much of a role do hunters play into this scenario? For you hunters in the room, I also want you to think about, if you've ever been hunting for any kind of birds, if you've been peppered by a metal shot before, it really never breaks the skin. And so we don't feel like this is a hunting issue. This is direct contact, point blank type issue. Criminal mischief, it's been brought up, you know, a lot of people run cattle on public lands. Are cattle being shot on public lands, be it criminal mischief or criminal acts? It's certainly a possibility. The other one, unintended exposure, living conditions. This we often look at wire. So wire in the stomach contents of the animal that then will protrude through the stomach and into the skirt and other portions of the organs. And then animal care, so administering shots, whether that be via darts or whether that be traditional techniques with a needle and syringe. I mentioned to you earlier that we think darts, and well, we know darts are one of the fastest growing items being found in a packing setting. I could give you many different examples that we've had in the last 6 months where darts have been found buried deep well within to the lean at the packing facility. Next slide, please. So just to give you some examples, and I know a lot of these are primarily metal shot, we want to give you pictures so you can see physically what does this look like when they find it in an animal in the packing facility. And so I've got a lot of examples of some really good metal shot, and you'll notice they vary in size. And so we've got everything from maybe a 8 or 9 shot all the way up to buckshot, with the largest we found being a mini cannonball that is the size of a golf ball. And yes, the animal did walk into the facility alive. The center photo, that is actually an eye of round steak that made it all the way to retail, and that was in a retail overwrap packaged in a grocery store just like that. And so again, this becomes a pretty big issue. We do not want this stuff to end up in a final product and we get customer complaints where this is making it all the way to the consumer. And then notice I've got some bullets, some fragmented bullets kind of on the bottom side. We've got a whole cluster of those that have been found that we have pictures of as well. Next slide, please. So why is this relevant to the producer? You know, why is this a producer related issue? And so I want to preface again that during the 2022 quality audit, we traveled all around the country and we collected samples and data from basically every major packing plant in the country. And the scary thing is, and Trey mentioned it, that 100% of our non-fed plants have a daily issue with foreign material in their facility, and 50% of fed plants are having the same issues. So this is not a fed versus non-fed issue. This is all cattle being sold for meat consumption. And we believe highly that almost all of this is happening in the production phase, whether it be, again, like we talked about, those cattle gathering techniques or how we're treating our cattle. If you look at that picture on the right, that specific example was actually pulled by WT personnel on a gut table at a packing plant from a lung. We were palpating lungs, and that dart was grown inside the lung. And again, I don't know how much force it takes for that to even occur, for the dart to make its way all the way through the hide, all the way through the bone, and bury itself into a lung. But that was a living, breathing animal that walked into a plant, and we had a dart buried inside the lung. And so again, we want to emphasize we've got to start looking at this on the production side and how we can limit some of these items that are making their way into the plant. Next slide. So what are we doing about it? Again, we can talk all day and say, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. We wanted to do physical research on, again, how can we add another hurdle or another measure to evaluate this and try to detect it before it gets into the plant. And so we have again, like I said, a funded pre-harvest beef safety research a proposal that was funded by checkoff dollars and through NCBA. And we wanted to know, can we detect foreign objects in the living animal? Can we detect them under the hide? Most of the measures that we have thus far are detecting metal objects post harvest. So think and in the fabrication room, maybe we have metal detector, maybe we have x-ray, maybe we have something, and I'll leave that for Pat to discuss. We wanted to know, is there something we can do before that animal walks in the building to evaluate whether or not they have a foreign object in them? And so that was the whole goal of the project. Next slide. So our objectives. We wanted to determine the efficacy of foreign material detection via ultrasound, x-ray, or metal detector. Now, mind you, the most common item that we would, or common uses that we would see in a packing plant post-harvest would be x-ray or metal detector. We added ultrasound in because it has a lot of uses in the live animal, specifically through the hide. And so we wanted to evaluate, do these detection methods work hide on? Can we see the metal types we're looking for? So we've evaluated it on a bunch of different types of metal shot, a bunch of different sizes of metal shot, darts, bullets, anything that we would find on a regular basis from a foreign material perspective. We want to evaluate these three detection methods with a piece of hide-on material. Now, again, it's going to view a little bit differently between these three when we go from hide-on to hide-off. And so we wanted to see, again, we're not saying we want to implement one of these immediately or right before pre-harvest. The whole goal of this is determine efficacy. Does it work? And then once we decide if it works and if it's sensitive enough and we can detect most or all metal objects, then we're going to go down the path of, okay, how do we implement this at a facility at chain speed? Is it possible? That would be the next step. So if we go to the next slide. So what have we done so far? And I didn't mention this before, and I need to mention this. Shelton Lukey, our graduate student, who helped me put these slides together, he's the graduate student that's actually working on this project. And one of the first things we did was we verified metal detection on ground beef trimmings. So of the metal shot sizes, of the objects that we had, how does metal detection work based on the size of the object that we're looking at? We also wanted to look at metal type. So we know between various metal shot types, you can have lead, steel, copper. There's a bunch of different lead shot types. And we wanted to see if metal detection was impacted by the type at all as well. And then we also wanted to verify all three of these detection methods with the hide-on tissue samples. So we have already done the verification processes with all of these. One of the things that we did in the way we were able to get hide-on samples is we went and collected off samples that were post-mortem so that we could get, again, their post-rigor. So we were able to pull tissue and hide samples at varying depths. And then we were able to test those depths with the various techniques, so ultrasound, X-ray, metal detection. If we'll jump to the next slide. So what are some of the preliminary findings? What do we have? And again, we're not finished with this project. What are some of the things that we're seeing based on those verification procedures that we've done so far? Detection is going to be depth dependent. Specifically, if we look at metal detection, again, depending on how deep that item in there or how strong your metal detector is, we're going to have some issues with when we get any kind of depth. Detection is metal type and size dependent. So we did have some issues with some of the metal types and being able to pick them up, specifically when we look at detection and ultrasound. And I will tell you specifically, when we get to those lower diameter BBs, especially when you start thinking about 7.5, 8, 9 shot that you're going to get from those shotgun shells, you can almost put the metal shot next to the metal detector, and there's certain cases that it won't even pick it up because it's not dense enough to be picked up on a metal detector. And so those are some of the issues that we're running into on the fabrication side, and it's showing too on the hide-on side. Detection is environment dependent. Those of you that have ultrasounded before or seen it done, you know you have to have a pretty clean surface on the hide. And so one of the things that we ran into is if you got samples with any kind of heavy feces or mud or tag buildup, you would almost have to clean that surface before you would use ultrasound and get it to where you could have good contact. Detection is speed dependent. So metal detection was obviously the fastest. It's the easiest to use. X-ray and ultrasound can be a lot slower, specifically ultrasound. And we had a certified tech that's measuring these samples for us. It can be very slow, especially if you don't know where that metal shot is or where that dart is in the sample. It takes time to locate it. And then detection is operator dependent. So again, on X-ray and detection, you can put just about anybody in there as long as they understand the equipment, and it's relatively easy. We had arguably one of the best ultrasound techs around, and again, in some of those scans that we did, it was very, very difficult to pick it up unless you were a skilled operator. So it's operator dependent. That's all I have for my presentation. And again, thank you for giving us this opportunity and put this data in front of you.
Thanks, Trent. Next slide, please. A lot of people ask what has changed in our industry with birdshot. Why has it become such a big issue? Obviously, birdshot has been around for a long time. What's happened in the industry? Well, many moons ago, what we used to use from a food safety standpoint was a measurement of 7 millimeters to 25 millimeters in length to describe anything that was a food safety hazard. So if you were in between 7 and 25 millimeters in length, that was a food safety hazard. Anything less than that was not going to be a hazard because you'd swallow it, pass it through your system. Anything bigger than that, you were going to notice and not consume, right? And that was something that was put out by the FDA, and we all used it in our hazard analysis plans throughout the ages. Next slide. Then there was a big recall that happened with Pilgrim's Pride, and it involved plastic foreign objects in chicken products that were sent to schools. That created a huge uproar, not only in the media, with our consumers, obviously, with their kids, etc. And so the question was, what is FSIS, our regulatory body from USDA, what are they going to do about this issue of foreign material that may be smaller than that 7 millimeters? Next slide. FSIS then came out with a ruling that said any foreign material, regardless of the physical characteristics of that foreign material, is an adulterant to that product. That product is now adulterated and is not fit for human consumption. So now any size, that 7 to 25 range, that is out the window. So if it's 0.000005 millimeters, all the way up to 10,000 millimeters, it doesn't matter. Everything in that window is now an adulterant. And as a establishment that produces product, we have to recognize that that is an issue, and we have to pull that product out of the marketplace and do something else with it. Next slide. States are now involved in this recall process as well. If you do a Google search, you can find out on March 5th of 2025, so about a month and a half ago, the State Department in Minnesota recalled beef that had birdshot in it. Solely due to birdshot, they did a recall on beef products. It's hitting the news, it's hitting our states, and people are pulling product out of the marketplace because of this. Next slide. As Trent was talking about, there was a survey done that he was a part of, but there was also an additional survey that was done where we wanted to focus on birdshot in grinding establishments. So a survey was done of 67 different grinding establishments in the US. These are the major beef grinding establishments. And these are the states where all of those grinding establishments are located. Regardless of the state that they were located in, they all had issues with birdshot. It's not a Texas issue or a New Mexico issue or a South Dakota issue. It's an entire United States issue. Next slide. In this survey of those 67 grinders, they asked on average per year, how many times do you have an issue with buckshot? They responded back with an average of 112 times a year they have an issue with buckshot in their ground beef. Now you compare that with what we've done on the abscess front. So we talked about in the 90s, we attacked abscesses and moved the needle location from the top butt down to the shoulder, and also from intermuscular to subcutaneous. So we could get rid of these abscesses that were showing up in the retail customer space. We've done a great job of reducing abscesses, but we have done nothing to reduce birdshot in our ground beef. Next slide. So you're saying, Pat, you're at this packing plant, you have 6 of them across the country. Obviously, you have the resources to invest in technology that can take all that out of there, right? And we do. We have metal detectors, we have defect eliminators, x-ray systems, vision systems. We're using artificial intelligence to train these systems to do a better job to get rid of these foreign objects. And then we also have the human element. So we have people watching product go by and pulling product that may have foreign objects in it off of the line. We have all these things in our plant, yet we still have problems. It's not 100% foolproof. It's not 100% fail-safe. Next slide. A grind system in one of these typical big grinding operations like the 67 that were surveyed, you start off with a combo dumper, and a combo is about 2,000 pounds of beef trimmings. From that combo dumper, we dump that onto a metal detector belt that has belt inspection, that visual inspection piece. That then goes into an initial coarse grind through an X-ray system that will kick out metal and other objects it finds, and then into a blender. That blender will typically hold around 6,000 pounds of beef, mixes that together to get a right fat percentage, then through a final grinder, and if we're making patties, it'll go through a patty machine, a patty metal detector, and then finally into the final package. Next slide. So what happens, you ask Pat, when you find something in your process? Well, we have to go back and look at all the information and try to figure out, where did this foreign material originate? Did it originate in our plant? Is it a piece of some of our equipment? If not, was it something that was inherent in the product, like birdshot, that came in? If that's the case, then we have to go to the source and say, this source was contaminated, and now we need to get our hands around a scope of product that we have produced in the window that we found that metal object, that birdshot, because we know that our detection system is not 100%. And as you just heard, any size is an adulterant in ground beef. So for us, we have to make sure that we get everything that could have been produced from that source material, which is at least 6,000 pounds from our blend. Next slide. Again, metal detectors are not the end all be all, right? As Trent was talking about, it depends on how fast that line is running, how dense the material is that BB was in. And again, to his point about hunting, these BBs are embedded deep in muscle tissue. There's no way for that to happen except intentionally aiming a gun at that animal and shooting it. Next slide. So I want to give you kind of an overview of, on average, if we're finding 112 events across the United States, what effect that has from a total industry. So if you start off with one BB identified in your event, and now we have to go back to the source material, which I said is going to include about 6,000 pounds because it's anything from that entire blender mixed together. The other thing you have to do is now you have to implicate the blend prior to that, because you don't know if that BB was hung up in the grinding operation somewhere from the previous blend. So to make sure that you capture everything, you're probably going to go after at least 12,000 pounds of ground beef to make sure that none of that leaves your establishment and could end up with a customer or consumer. If you take the average carcass weight of steers and heifers today, it's about 940 pounds. About 25% of that will go to ground beef, which is about 235 pounds. So if you have a BB event and you look at 12,000 pounds and divide that by 235 pounds per head, you're looking at a 51 head equivalent every time we find birdshot in our product. Again, these 67 grinders said they had on average 112 events per grinder per year. That equates to about 5,712 head per year that they found per facility. You multiply that by 67 facilities, that's worth 382,704 head per year of ground beef trimmings that would have come from those animals now go to rendering. They're no longer used for edible consumption. Healthy animals that spent all that time on grass, in feedlots, under care, with animal welfare concerns, everything that that could befall that animal, they actually made it to the packing plant, made it through our process, made it through our pathogen testing program, got into our grinders, and we had to throw it away because it had bird shot in it. When you look at per pounds, how many pounds that would be per year from an industry standpoint, that's 90 million pounds of ground beef we throw away due to bird shot. If you do the simple math and look at what ground beef costs today in retail stores, it's on average about $5 per pound across the United States. That is a lot of money that we're pulling out of the system because people decided to use a shotgun and bird shot to move stubborn cattle. I need your help. I need your help in the industry. I need all of your help on this call. I need you to talk to your friends, your family, your neighbors, anybody that you can about moving cattle with shotguns, and that it should never happen in our industry. Thank you.
Okay, wow, that's pretty profound, isn't it? I just it's sometimes as a producer hard for me to even hear that. As I look back at the results of that 22 National Beef Quality Audit, one thing that came out of that is that food safety in our industry is non-negotiable. It's now an expectation. We have made significant strides, and we've set a very high bar for ourselves, folks. It's a non-negotiable thing. We have to make sure we're putting safe food into the consumer to the consumer table, and we have to do that consistently. The other thing we know is that consumers of our products care deeply about how their cattle are raised and handled. So this whole perception of what we're doing and animal care, we have to stay out in front of. Also, as a producer, I think about how in every animal we sell, we want to add as much value as we can. This is true for cull cows and bulls, as Patrick talked about, because they're a large contributor of the revenue. It's important for them because of the animal care standpoint, but it has a huge economic component as well. And it's obviously true for the non-fed cattle that are entering in that market pathway. I think about our industry as having really only so much revenue that we have to share. And as we go through the cattle cycles, we at times have different leverage in our sector than other times. But we want to do everything in our power to keep that pie as big as it can so that our percentage can help us maintain profitability. I think it's really, really important. This issue of foreign objects in beef, I think it creates an inefficiency in our industry, which ultimately leads back to hurting the value that we get for it. This issue creates a consumer perception problem that has the potential to erode demand. We've worked so hard for that. We can't let an issue like this thwart that momentum. We have to maintain our efficiency. I get that. We have to be efficient, but we can do that while continuing to enhance consumer acceptance of our products. It does not have to be one or the other. I know in our operation, BQA is important. We talk about that a lot, that we're handling cattle properly, and we're doing that because it makes money for us, but it also enhances the value of the beef in the marketplace that always circles back to us. I think that sound handling and animal care practices will result in the cattle not having foreign material that ends up in the beef. We talk about in our business quite a bit about we're professionals. We should be the best in the business at what we do. You are professional beef producers. You have to manage your business in a professional way. And I do not believe that in any stretch of the imagination, shooting an animal could ever be considered a professional way to run this business. And I think here's the deal. We as an industry, we have to fix this before it gets to the packing plant. I really appreciate all they're doing to try to try to keep this out from getting to our consumer. It's really important. Please keep that up. Please keep that research up. But we as an industry have to fix this before it even gets that far. I'll go as far as to say that as an operator, if you can't manage cattle without creating foreign objects in the beef, I believe that you have no business being in our industry. We just cannot tolerate this. My charge for all of us today is that we work together to get this problem rectified. Let's hold ourselves accountable and voluntarily fix this issue, like we've voluntarily fixed so many other issues over the years. As I started with this, earlier, I think we have so many successes to be proud of. We have so many reasons to pat ourselves on the back in this industry. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate what you do, the kind of cattle you raise. It is so important and so valuable for us. And I really look forward to working with you and tackling this problem. I think we've got to get it fixed, and I know you'll be committed to our industry to help us get that done. Thank you so very much, and appreciate all the speakers today.
Awesome. We have some great questions coming into the Q&A that we'll start going through. Feel free if you have questions to keep putting those in the chat, and we'll get to as many as we can, and certainly work to have the experts answer all of those because you have some great questions coming in. Trent, I think we'll start with you. Do you think that we will be able to detect metal shot in live cattle? Like, could it be detected walking through a chute or off the trailer in the future?
Yeah, that question has come up since we've started this, and I've given this talk, I think this is twice now, specifically about the research is where, if this works, does it get implemented? And I don't think we know the answer to that question directly yet. I think our goal at the moment is it even possible? And so can or will it work on a hide-on animal? And then I think in the future, the goal would be, can we build a system that is, as they enter through a chute into the packing plant or off the trailer? Yes. Could we build something or have the technology that could detect that? Are we there right now? No. We want to know, will it work? And if we know it will work, then we can start to develop and work with somebody that maybe has the technology base that's maybe not working in this space, that would come over to this space and help us out with some of these issues.
Great. Trey, this one is for you. If you know someone in your area is shooting cattle, what should you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think first and foremost, we have to, what we can control is ourselves, right? And so we're not going to be able to control everybody else. But I do not think it is inappropriate to call those people out on that. I think to be able to call them out and explain, just for the things we've talked about today, how this is hurting our industry. I think we have to be careful about not getting, in those particular instances, getting it on the front page of the local paper if you can help it, right? We're concerned about an industry image, but I think we have to be bold enough, and I think you can, through your industry groups, through local community groups, you can put some social peer pressure on folks by just calling out the issue. It's a tough question, but I'm sure people are going to have to face that.
Definitely. Pat, are we seeing any of these same foreign object issues with imported product?
We are not seeing the same rate of issues with our imported product that we are domestically. It's a much larger problem on our domestic supply of beef than it is in our imported trim.
And here's a follow-up question for you, and then maybe anyone else can chime in. Are we having instances of foreign object finding its way into export markets? And if so, what happens when it does make it into those export markets?
Absolutely, we do. We see it enter export markets There's actually some videos out there of birdshot that made it out to South Korea, and people put that on social media. Big scare about American beef and birdshot and that beef. Talk about lead poisoning, et cetera, all kinds of bad, negative media influence from those events that occur. Obviously, anytime any of those things happen, that puts our companies at risk of being delisted from being able to export to those countries. So when that happens, it takes a very long time with a lot of corrective actions and preventative measures. And how do I, as a packer, write a corrective action or preventative measure for birdshot and muscle tissue that came in the live animal? It's a very difficult situation, and obviously something that needs to be rectified.
Here's our next one. This is mind-boggling. Do you suspect that there are the people shooting are cattle handlers or random inconsiderate hunters or malicious teens and criminals?
I guess
And
I can
that's
answer
it.
that one. Yeah. We think both are happening. We suspect that this is more cattle handling related than criminal mischief. Far more cattle are handled and used every day for transport and everything else than we would see from a criminal mischief perspective. Do we knock it out as not being a thing? No. But again, we think a lot of this, and this is from personal experience on my side, you know, and knowing people that have done this. We personally, me personally, I think it's more of a cattle handling side of things, especially when you get into rough country, rough terrain, rough brush, a little bit crazier cattle. That's something that gets brought up pretty frequently. And I've been told also, anytime a lot of the people that use helicopters for roundup, that is one of the tactics that they will use also.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Trent. If it was a random mischief act, if it was a random person driving down the road shooting a shotgun at an animal, it wouldn't be as big an issue as it is. When you have that many incidences on average at each one of these grinders, it's a systemic issue. It's not a shotgun being used on the neighbor's cow one time. It's a systemic issue, and that's the device they are using to move cattle. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be on this call tonight unless it was.
Pat, you shared some calculations with us relating to product loss from foreign object contamination. Would it be correct that if trim is in a combo, that it's even more than just the producers who are doing this that are being impacted? So those producers who are doing everything correctly could also have product wasted because of these efforts.
Absolutely. So again, back to my example, you put 3 of these combos into a blender, and one of those combos may have had 2 head that they used birdshot to round up those cattle, right? In that combo, and in that combo, you're going to have 2,000 pounds, so that's a lot more than 2 head. The bad actors create an economic loss of perfectly viable product that we should be consuming, that we should be putting out there on the market, as beef is the best protein out there on the marketplace, and we're having to pull it off because of bad actors out there in the field. But again, it's not a small issue. It's not 1 or 2 head. It's a systemic issue.
Very much so. What happens to the contaminated meat? So you said it can't go to consumers. Where's it going?
So we will send that meat to rendering that will go through other processes, but it'll become inedible for human consumption is what we do with that. We don't allow it to go out for any human consumption.
The next question, are darts and needles also as big of an issue, or are they easier to detect? Why was there not as much conversation around those?
I'll
Darts-
start.
Go ahead.
Go
Trent.
ahead. Yeah, so we mentioned, and I mentioned in my talk there, and Pat will probably reiterate this, you're not finding them as much as you're finding metal shot. But the number of complaints that we have gotten in probably the last, I don't know, 6 months to a year, the number of complaints related back to darts has gone up drastically. And this wouldn't be as much of an issue if it were, I mean, it's still an issue if it's the needle tip. We're talking about the whole dart, all 6 to 8 inches of it, completely lodged 6 inches deep into the muscle. And so that's where you're like, how is that even physically possible? You know, you're not just getting the needle, you're getting the entire dart. I didn't speak on it as much because it's not as big of an issue as metal shot, but Pat can probably speak more to instance.
Sure. I think the issue actually with these darts goes back to the 90s when we had abscesses. So when people are using these darts, they have guns with scopes on them, and you can pump them from 1 to 9 times, with 9 being the number of pumps you have to use when you're so many yards away, and just 1 pump when you're really close to the animal, right? And so if you pump that gun a lot and you shoot at that animal, you're not going to shoot in the neck region where you should be shooting it from an abscess standpoint, right? It's obviously not going to be subcutaneous. It's going to be intermuscular. But they're shooting that animal in the back half of that animal where they're not going to miss. When they shoot it in the back half of the animal, it's going into that top butt product. It's going into that whole muscle cut that we're selling downstream to a steak cutter, and that steak cutter's cutting through and finds a huge dart with a syringe in it, back to the old abscess days. We're substituting these abscesses now with metal darts in those same cuts that are getting out to these further processors, and that's the big issue with the darts. The darts are big enough that we're able to detect those with our metal detection system on trim and ground beef, but on these big cuts like a top butt, inside round, etc., it's going to get all the way to the further processor before we're able to find it. And then again, we have to submit a corrective action and preventative measure for something that a producer did out there in the field.
Yeah, Jessica, I want to add one more thing to that. The depth and the places that we're getting feedback that the darts are being found is unreal and would blow your mind. I mean, I have seen personally a dart gun being used, and I've never seen one used to the extent where it goes that deep. I know that there is material out there where you, again, like Pat said, you can crank up the power, the distance, whatever you're trying to do, but it's unethical when you see it and how deep it is, and especially that one I showed you where we pull it out of a lung. That shouldn't even be it shouldn't even be possible. We should never find stuff like that, and yet we're finding it right now, and it's increasing.
Great. Patrick, this one is for you. The loss has even more, would the loss have even more financial impact now with the value of animals and cuts that we're seeing today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a pound of beef lost today is worth substantially more than what it was just a few short years ago. If you think about cull cows, well, let's just think about the cull cow side of it. If it's worth $1.30 or $1.40 today compared to a few years ago, when it was 60 cents a pound or less, that's over 2 times the value loss. And as across the supply chain, prices have basically doubled in a lot of different areas. So the losses today for every segment are substantially more than they were just because of the higher price, which means that everybody up and down the supply chain is giving up more value too.
Very much so. The next question, can a carcass with foreign objects be traced back to the seller so they can be fined or discounted?
For us, if it's in the carcass, then we're able to identify which feed yard it came from, right? Or if we're buying fats out of a sale barn, which sale barn it came to. It's really up to that feed yard or that feeder to have to trace that back to where that animal came from on the ranch. But the issue that we have is most of the issues we have in ground beef is because it's made its way from a carcass into all the little bitty parts and pieces, and now we don't know exactly which carcass or which lot it came from. We don't process entire lots of carcasses all at one time in our system. They're split up in order by different grades, by different yield grades, et cetera, so we can run our plants efficiently. So because of that, we'll have different lots of cattle all running together into our fabrication process, and then it's cut up, and you have so many in a combo that you lose exactly where that came from a feed yard standpoint. That feed yard would have to do the work when it's a carcass to go back to the producer and understand where that's at. And as we all know, that could have been the stocker operator, that could have been the cow-calf operator, that could have been a backgrounder, who knows?
I want to add on there, it's a tad easier when you get on the cow bull side, depending on how that's coming in. If there are people that are selling direct to the packer, you could theoretically trace it back because they go individually back by name and then to the auction market. But it's like Pat said, when we're finding this, we're not finding it when it's a carcass. We're finding it when it gets into a trim barrel, and then you've got, I don't know how many different head in that one specific combo. And unless all of those animals from that specific combo were from the same lot, you have a general idea of who it may go back to, but you don't know for sure who that might get to. I would say maybe if you were lucky, 10% you could find in the cow bull plant on the carcass side of things. We do get some samples and photos sent to us where they found it on the harvest floor, but very rarely. They're finding it in the trim via metal detection, X-ray, or pickers on the line that are catching it.
I'll make it a little easier. If we could do that, we absolutely would.
Awesome. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you all for your great insights you've shared with the group today. We know a number were able to join us and many more will be able to join us on the recording, but we're so thankful you were able to share this important industry issue with us.